On June 24, 1967, six young men prepared to explore a dangerous cave system in Yorkshire, England. All were experienced cavers, used to tight passages and long underground stretches. Among them was Michael Ryan, a 17-year-old boy passionate about adventure and geology. The cave chosen that day was called Mossdale Caverns. It was known in the community as one of the most treacherous in the country. The entrance was discreet, just a crack between rocks near Mossdale Scar. But inside, it turned into a maze of low tunnels, narrow curves, and crawling passages. That morning, the weather was cloudy but calm. No one imagined what was about to happen. With ropes, flashlights, helmets, and backpacks, the group began the descent. The plan was to explore one of the tightest sections, the Far Marathon Crawl. It was so narrow they could barely turn their heads inside. The team moved in single file, slowly pushing through every inch. Outside, the weather changed without warning. A heavy rain hit the area earlier than expected. The limestone terrain quickly absorbed the stormwater, and that water started flowing directly into the cave. Down below, the air grew damp and heavy. The floor became slippery. Small trickles of water turned into rushing streams. Then came the sound, the roar of floodwater echoing closer. They realized what was happening too late. The cave was flooding. There was no time to turn back. The path they came through was already partially submerged. They tried to return, but it was impossible. Water rushed violently through the tunnels. They were trapped in the narrowest part of the cave with no way out. On the surface, no one noticed the group was missing for the first few hours. But by nightfall, concern set in. Rescue teams were called. Experienced volunteers rushed to the entrance of Mossdale Caverns. It was pouring rain. Visibility was terrible. The cave entrance already showed signs of flooding. Still, the rescuers decided to go in. They worked in shifts, crawling through the same tunnels the boys had crossed. The first day passed with no signs of the group. Then came the second. The rescuers advanced a bit further, but there were still strong water currents in many flooded areas. It was impossible to go any deeper, so they had to retreat again. Only on the third day did the water levels begin to drop. Then, the rescuers resumed the journey, crawling through narrow cracks and tight passages until they finally reached the Far Marathon Crawl. And what they found there was devastating. Michael Ryan was still wearing his helmet. The headlamp attached to it no longer worked. All six were dead. Their bodies lay side by side, trapped inside the tunnel. They were just a few meters away from a slightly higher area, which might have saved them, but they couldn't reach it. Removing the bodies was extremely dangerous. The area was too unstable and narrow. After discussions with the families, a painful decision was made. The bodies would be left inside the cave. The entrance was sealed with concrete. Outside, a plaque was installed in memory of the six young men. It bears all their names: Michael Ryan, Jeffrey Workman, John Ogden, David Adamson, Terry Watson, and Colin Vickers. The tragedy shook the entire British caving community. It was considered the worst cave disaster in British history, and it led to permanent changes in safety protocols. From that point on, checking the weather forecast became a mandatory rule for any underground exploration. Today, Mossdale Caverns is seen as a tomb. No one enters anymore. The James G. Mitchell Incident. On February 13, 1965, James G. Mitchell, 23 years old, set out with two friends in search of adventure. He was passionate about caves. That day was freezing, and snow was falling. Alongside his two friends, he headed into the Mannheim Forest. Their destination was a nearly unknown cave, discovered by local teachers. They called it Schroeder's Pants Cave, a strange name for such a treacherous place. Upon arriving, they began preparing for the descent. Mitchell went first, tied the rope to a secure anchor point, fastened the harness to his body, and began descending. Inside, the space narrowed quickly. It was dark, wet, and freezing. The main shaft dropped over 20 meters. In the middle of the shaft, there was a small underground waterfall. Cold water flowed constantly. James wanted to examine a side opening, but something went wrong. The rope twisted. His body turned. James called for help. His friends shouted. James answered, but with difficulty. They tried pulling him back, but he wouldn't move. The rope was pulled at the wrong angle. Time passed, and the water didn't stop, hitting his chest, his face, chilling his bones, freezing his skin. He was trapped, his arm tangled, his torso pressed against the wall. The waterfall poured directly onto him. Icy, Relentless. His body temperature began to drop. James started trembling. Then his voice grew faint, until it disappeared. His friends ran for help. Within hours, experienced cavers, firefighters, and military personnel arrived at the scene. It was a difficult rescue. The rescuers began descending, tried to warm him up, tried to adjust the rope. But his body no longer responded. The rescue was impossible under those conditions, as the cave was too treacherous and had already begun to collapse. Removing James would have put others at risk. The rescuers returned to the surface and explained the delicate situation to his friends. In the end, they decided to seal the cave permanently, using stones. James Mitchell was dead. James remained inside for over 40 years. Only in 2006, with modern technology and specialized teams, were James's remains recovered. His brother, Bill, followed everything closely. And finally, he was able to bury him with dignity. Today, Schroeder's Pants Cave is avoided by everyone. It is remembered as a dark, icy trap, and James's death still stands as a brutal reminder of the dangers below the surface. A body suspended, trapped, underwater, no way out, and no warmth. The Plura Cave Incident, February 2014. The temperature in northern Norway was below freezing. The lakes were covered in ice, and the wind cut across the face like a blade. Still, 5 experienced divers from Finland were preparing for a mission that, to many, seemed impossible: to fully traverse Plura Cave, one of the most treacherous submerged cave systems in Europe. The team was made up of Patrik Grönqvist, Vesa Rantanen, Kai Kenkänen, Jari Uusitalo, and Jari Huotarinen. All of them were trained, experienced, and highly equipped. Each carried 7 compressed air cylinders, thermal diving suits, and used guidelines, a kind of nylon thread fixed to the cave to ensure the return path. The plan was to cross 2.3 kilometers of Plura Cave to the opposite side, at the Stein-Nugelflaget system, navigating through narrow passages, deep chambers, and dangerous curves, all underwater, in total darkness. For safety reasons, they split into 2 groups. Patrik Grönqvist and Jari Huotarinen entered first, and about an hour later, the other 3 divers followed. They entered the water on February 6, 2014, around 1 p.m. The first part of the dive went as expected. They were well prepared, moving in coordinated rhythm and respecting all the rules of technical cave diving. Plura Cave, though dangerous, was familiar to them. But the final stretch held a silent trap, an area known for extremely narrow passages, tight angles, and sharp rocks that could trap a diver if equipment was misaligned. That's where the tragedy began. In the last section of the crossing, Jari Huotarinen began navigating one of the final narrow fissures. It was a sharp elbow-shaped curve with reduced height and a real risk of entrapment. Something went wrong. Patrik Grönqvist, experienced and ahead, noticed Jari Huotarinen was no longer behind him. Realizing something was wrong, he turned back to help. The passage was so tight that the water flow created counter-pressure, making it nearly impossible to retreat. The cylinders on their backs began hitting the walls, and mobility was lost by the second. Jari Huotarinen started swallowing water and slowly lost consciousness. Knowing he couldn't help and realizing he too was in danger, Patrik Grönqvist chose to move forward, completing the crossing, a decision that proved vital to his survival. About an hour after the first group entered, Vesa Rantanen, Jari Uusitalo, and Kai Kenkänen entered the water. Vesa, the third diver, came across Jari Huotarinen and also had to make a choice: turn back or complete the crossing. He passed by his friend and finished the route. Jari Uusitalo was right behind. Upon seeing the situation, he panicked, became disoriented, and also ended up dying. The 5th and final diver, upon finding Jari Uusitalo's body, turned back and did not complete the traverse, returning to the starting point. 2 divers completed the journey, and the 5th diver returned to the entry. After a period of recovery, Kai Kenkänen drove to where they were staying. The group contacted emergency services, and the local police were notified. Police divers entered the cave and concluded that it would be impossible to recover the bodies without risking more lives due to pressure, temperature, and extreme complexity. They returned to the surface, and it was decided that the cave would be closed, with no possibility of retrieving the bodies. Kai Kenkänen and Vesa Rantanen, unwilling to leave their friends behind, planned and executed the rescue on their own, without government authorization. 2 months and 20 days after the incident, they re-entered Plura Cave, determined to bring their friends home. Despite the danger, every move was calculated to the millimeter. After more than 10 hours of diving, they successfully brought both bodies back to the surface. Jari Usitalo and Jari Huotarinen were buried with national mourning. The international media reported the event as an act of extreme courage, but the divers themselves rejected the label of heroes. Kai Kankinen said in an interview, "I didn't go there for glory. I went there out of respect. They were our brothers, and you don't leave a brother behind." A story of courage, of loyalty, and of two friends who went back into hell to bring the other two home. The Nutty Putty Cave Incident. On November 24, 2009, John Edward Jones was slowly crawling through a dark, damp passage of Nutty Putty Cave in Utah. It was just 2 days before Thanksgiving, and he was with his brother in what felt like a nostalgic reunion. Nutty Putty Cave has narrow, vertical, and confusing tunnels, with a total mapped length of about 650 meters and a depth of 43 meters. Despite being relatively small, it's extremely treacherous. John had explored the cave as a child and wanted to relive a bit of his youth before heading home. Upon entering the cave, John decided to explore one of the lesser-known crevices. When he encountered two splits, he chose the narrower one, believing it would lead to a new chamber. He was wrong. That passage ended in a dead end and was only 25 centimeters wide. It was so tight that only a person's torso could barely squeeze through, and even then, with difficulty, he entered, pushing with his shoulders, feet, and steady breathing. He advanced about 6 meters and realized the space was narrowing even more. He tried to back out, but as he moved his hips to reverse, his chest became wedged against the rock. His arms had no room to assist in the movement. Each breath became harder. His chest was being crushed, and worst of all, he had inadvertently turned himself upside down, with his body stuck at a nearly 70-degree angle. Trapped head down, his body began to give in slowly to gravity. Blood started pooling in the upper part of his body. Internal pressure increased, and his organs began shutting down one by one. His face swelled. His lungs, compressed, couldn't expand properly. His heart beat rapidly, trying to keep blood flowing against gravity. It was a race against time, and John knew it. He called for his brother, who immediately went to get help. Soon, a specialized rescue team was at the cave's entrance. One of the most complex rescue operations in American history was about to begin. More than 130 rescuers were mobilized. They tried to dig a path from above. They used ropes, pulleys, tools. They built wooden braces to prevent the tunnel from collapsing. But nothing worked. The passage was so narrow that no equipment fit. No person could position themselves correctly without risking getting stuck too. Despite the pain, John remained lucid. He talked to rescuers, who were able to reach a safe distance to speak with him. One firefighter managed to hold his hand. John said he didn't want to die, that he loved his wife, that he wanted to see his daughter grow up. Then, at the most delicate moment of the operation, the pulley system gave out. One of the devices supporting the rescue structure broke irreversibly. The crevice was too unstable. When they tried to pull him out, the system failed, and John's body slid even deeper. The pain worsened. The pressure intensified. At that point, his body was already on the verge of collapse. After more than 27 hours trapped, unable to move, with his body crushed and blood pooling, John Edward Jones stopped responding. His heart couldn't take it. He died there, at the bottom of Nutty Putty Cave, fully aware of his fate, knowing no one would be able to get him out. It was a slow, painful, and lonely death. But perhaps the most macabre part came after. No subsequent attempt to remove his body succeeded. The risks were too high and could result in more deaths. So, officials made a drastic decision. Nutty Putty Cave was permanently sealed with concrete. John's body remains there to this day, trapped in the same spot where he spent nearly 30 hours. He never came out, buried alive. That cave is no longer a tourist site. It became a tomb of stone, silence, and tragedy, where a man was swallowed by his own curiosity and never returned. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel. The next story is already being unearthed, and it begins where this one ends.